Being powerful is a bit like being ladylike. So if you have to say you are, you probably ain't. So I think I like America most of all on the days when people are not going around shouting USA, USA, we're number one, we're the greatest. I prefer the days when they don't do that, when they're probably most to be admired.
What is it that makes us boast about our greatness and belittle others? What is it that keeps us from ascending beyond the immediate? I cannot help but wonder what Hitchens would say today. It is a thought that somewhat haunts me as I stumble through communicating a similar belief of many before me, that we are brothers and sisters of the human race, with core values shared among us, which are hidden in the labels and divisions we create.
And if you understand freedom, it's based on tolerance and nonviolence. So if it's tolerance, it should be bringing all kinds of people together, and that's following our Constitution. We shouldn't be fighting among ourselves, because we shouldn't be fighting in Washington. If we all take the same oath of office, where does the fight come from? Somebody is messing up somewhere.
Libertarians proclaim reducing government interference because all Americans should be free to live their lives and pursue their interests as they see fit, as long as they do no harm to another. That peaceful, honest people should decide for themselves how to live their lives without fear of criminal penalties, and that the government's responsibility, if any, should be protecting its citizens from force and fraud.
The ruling class has always taught and trained you to believe it to be your patriotic duty to go to war and to have yourself slaughtered at their command.
The socialist soapbox calls for a classless society with communal ownership and perspective that is driven to enhance freedom, justice, and solidarity towards a goal of peace. Peace, of course, includes police abolishment, which I must say is highly unlikely to ever be a reality, but it is the only ethical goal.
Right? Forget about effectiveness or not effectiveness. You don't get to confiscate my money just because you and your friends vote to take it.
The deliberate pragmatism of conservative thought espouses the value of moral order and building off the best of the past with long-term goals that are achieved mainly through community and family with an ideally restrained and fiscally prudent government.
People are born to be free, and that their basic instinct is the desire to free themselves from coercion, authority, and oppression.
The ideal liberal is said to believe in that natural goodness of human beings and the intrinsic value of individual liberty, that to have an honorable society, we must have moral equality across sex, race, birth origin, religion, gender, class, wealth, etc., which is achieved through nonviolent modifications of institutions.
With certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
America, America, America. Cannot help but believe we have steered ourselves quite off course. We are now reading Chapter 5 of Crimes and Punishments, Consequences of Foregoing Principles. Last episode, we left with what does the consequences of foregoing principles even mean? Well, Beccaria said it, so I did too. Well, more accurately, someone translated Beccaria as saying that. But the way I mean it, and hope you accept it, is that there are some grounding principles which should underlay the why we do anything as a society. Deviating from those core principles can have severe consequences. Think of possessing a core principle that all people are valued and should be treated with respect. Departing from that principle allows for the acceptance of revenge and more violence as justice. For the sake of discussion, the following is an uncited abstract I came across about Beccaria's original chapter. This article discusses the association between laws and punishment. The laws only can determine the punishment of crimes, and the authority of making penal laws can only reside with the legislator, who represents the whole society, united by the social compact. But as a punishment, increased beyond a degree fixed by law is the just punishment with the addition of another. It follows that no magistrate, even under a pretense of zeal or the public good, should increase the punishment already determined by the laws. The sovereign, who represents the society itself, can only make general laws to bind the members, but it belongs not to him to judge whether any individual has violated the social compact or incurred the punishment in consequence. In my journeys, I have found it very difficult to have discussions with the self-labeled progressives, liberals, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, socialists, and more. But it should be acknowledged not so with the libertarians. This group seems to grasp the consequence of foregoing principles more than any of the other groups I have encountered, and I believe that is why they have engaged in dialogue with me more honestly than most others. Standouts have been the Lions of Liberty group, and you can find them at lionsofliberty.com. I have at least 3 discussions with them on their network with Editor-in-Chief Mark Clare and veteran of the group John Odermatt. The other libertarian who I need to recognize is Dave Smith. You can find him over at comicdavesmith.com. Dave and I had at least 2 conversations on his network. I have found these individuals to be interested in the truth and finding solutions to improve society. There are things where I disagree with them, probably most things, but that is okay. And my ultimate belief is that there are plenty of rational responses to any problem. If your solution is rational, then we just have a difference of opinion. I even extend this to irrational solutions sometimes. If you are a Christian and you truly try to live like Jesus, I cannot see how we can have a problem. But you got there quite irrationally. Right after we go over a little bit more about what crimes and punishments in the 21st century are, we will get to the consequences of foregoing principles. Like most cops, the emotions felt when pinning the badge on my uniform for the first time was a source of immense pride, but also a shocking reality to the complication of performing a duty under the weight of such power and responsibility. The callousness of veterans cops and the braggadocious masculinity of the streets are immature expressions of the generations of trauma enacted on our brothers and sisters from a system oppressing us all. My internal fights with policing, whistleblowing, scholarly endeavors, reform efforts, and politics have failed in exhausting fashion.
And what I'm trying to say is that we are looking at people who are doing nothing new, and if we focus on the actions, then we can fix the things for next time. Because when you focus on people, we end up thinking we can chop the head off, they put a new person in and something will change. But if we don't focus on the methodologies and the institutions, then we will be totally missing
somebody, put them in a prison cell, do the paperwork, go back out and do it again. So what we really need is to change the incentives and disincentives so that no matter what the role, we're still going towards that objective that actually serves you.
More occupation, more vehicles, if your answer continues to be violent, because we have to understand that everything about policing is inherently violent. I have come in there with authority and told you what you will do.
I believe one of the reasons behind my struggles is that I had not laid out a consistent and intertwined philosophy of what in the hell I was trying to say. For the philosophical foundations of crime and punishment to be ushered into the 21st century, a reimagination of our institutions is necessary. Building off the famous works of Cesar Beccaria, I construct those pathways to the Enlightenment period of justice. Free will, sanctuary cities, gun control, eyewitness testimony, incarceration, and more must all work together for a prosperous society. Learning these lessons has been a brutal journey for me, and is unlikely to be an easy one for you, but it is one that we owe to the future, to make a safer world for our children to enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Crimes and Punishments in the 21st Century by yours truly, Michael Wood, is most conveniently ordered from the evil empire Amazon, because we are in that 21st century after all. For the enhanced and expanded audiobook, check out Audible. In the meantime, the philosophical half of Crime and Punishments, all 40-some chapters and then some, is being presented as a free podcast from iMember Media at imembermedia.com and will be available on all major platforms and direct from the publisher. Pause the video or see the links in the notes and prepare for the challenge and adventure of self-critical thought. Chapter 5. The Consequences of Foregoing Principles. When violence is the answer to the enforcement of legislation, the most extreme consequences of foregoing principles are set into motion. Legislators are empowered to craft the rules of a mutually beneficial societal agreement into a common language. The violation of this compact by any participant, government included, is an introduction to anarchy. Rules which are enforced through violence are a violation of the societal compact as much as any act of violence is against the community. The issuance of law is insufficient justification to enact the force of the state under comply or die conditions. In addition to a dedicated reluctance to use violence, there are universal principles which must exist for organized humanity. 1. There is no reason to be confined to any physically or socially constructed borders. Society is the whole of the people, and that community is defined by the total of those under the social bonds. 2. No magistrate, judge, or authority may exceed or rule beyond the agreements outlined in the legislated law. When the judgment of reparations is left to the biases, prejudices, biological influences, and such of the individual, equality is impossible. 3. The laws regulating the societal bond shall not be hastily written and changed by the highest number, for the mob cannot rule, and popularity contests are ripe for corruption. The bond of society is principled in mutual benefit. What is good for the weakest among us is representative of a sustainable societal bond, and a robust societal bond is good for everyone in the community. 4. If every individual be bound to society, society is equally bound to him, by a contract which, from its nature, equally binds both parties. In the courtroom of adjudication, the temptation to make a spectacle of the proceeding must be avoided. The adversarial construct of the courtroom comes from the threat of violent punishment methodology. A violation of the social contract was thought to require punishment, and thus the society stood to accuse someone. The accused person was expected to deny the charges, and a third party needed to mitigate. Beccaria argued that punishment could not be issued which would harm the greater good, and no more than to prevent the crime. The logic remains rational. There is just an interesting twist that punishment is not a factor in crime prevention. As it turns out, punishment is always more than needed to prevent crime. In an adversarial court, a representative of the state, with all the massive power that comes with it, is pitted against one community member to prove their guilt. Under such circumstances, the mission of the state is to criminalize its own members. The court must be a quest for truth and constructed of a jury of peers on a fact-finding mission. Half of the jury is to consist of peers from the dominant social constructs the accused sees themselves in. The other half of the jury is to consist of a random population sample, and the accused can strike anyone or everyone in the first draft. The motivation of the state must be to represent societal interest, not to obtain an adversarial conviction. For conviction, a safeguarding principle is that the societal enactment of laws and the consensus of the community must both be present and the lesser consequence prevail. Tune in to the next episode as we explore the interpretation of laws. In America, we have come to broadly accept that the law is interpreted through authority figures, generally judges. Speaking of dangerous things to accept as conventional wisdom, I believe allowing the interpretation of the laws is extremely dangerous.